Hey everyone, this is the Coffee with a Geek program. My name is Andy Wheelock. I have a really awesome guest with me today. It is Intellectual Takeout, Annie Holmquist. And Annie, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I don't have coffee today, and I'll tell you why. It is blazing hot here in the eastern New York State. Believe it or not, we've had 80-degree temperatures, which is very rare for September. So just have the coffee cup. And my coffee cup, actually, this goes way back to my first years of teaching Albion Middle School. So, Albion. And Annie, you said you just had water today. So,
yeah.
All right. Fair enough. So, Annie, let me just walk through maybe your background that you sent to me. And you're a senior writer at Intellectual Takeout. And we'll talk about quite a bit about Intellectual Takeout. And you are kind of the content production person and social media website messaging. Your educational background, you got a BA in Biblical Studies from University of Northwestern, St. Paul. And you've had 20 plus experience, which seems strange. You seem way too young for 20 plus years of experience as a music educator. And you're a volunteer teacher and you work with some inner city children. So,
yes, that's correct.
All right. So let me think. And you can find some of your work in other places. So you're at Intellectual Takeout, which is a website we'll talk about, Foundation for Economic Education, and the Imaginative Conservative. So let's start off with Intellectual Takeout, if you don't mind, because I'm a big fan of Intellectual Takeout. And the reason I am is because I think by its design, it really makes you think.
Yes.
Which is a good thing. And so maybe let me just back up and have you introduce Intellectual Takeout a little bit. And what is the website, and how did you become a writer for it? And maybe what is it like working for a website that's dedicated to making people think?
Yes, well, our website is intellectualtakeout.org. And our basic intention is to feed minds, but also to foster discussion. And to also promote rational discourse, especially in this day and age when it seems like discourse, reasoned discourse is falling apart and really being overcome by emotionalism too. So that's kind of our main message. We bring up a lot of different topics that are in the news, different policy ideas, and so on and so forth. And we just try to make them very simple, something quick that people can just get ideas in this age where we're so used to getting fast information. So that's kind of the gist behind the website. Then in terms of how did I get started with ITO? I actually was in my senior year of college. I had waited a few years and to go to college, and then I was deciding, okay, what am I going to do next, and so on. And a very good friend of mine said, hey, there is this new organization starting up. It's called Intellectual Takeout. They're looking for interns to do research and writing for the summer. And at the time I thought, oh, this person does not know me as well as they think they do. I hate research and writing. But on the encouragement of my dad, he said, yeah, I think you should try that. And I thought, okay, it's only for the summer. It'll be fine. Well, it turned out that I really enjoyed it a lot. And that was 8 years ago. And I've been doing this ever since. So the nature of my job has changed over the years. In the beginning, we were doing much more in-depth dive into different areas. A few years ago, we started on the writing circuit more, and it's been pretty heavy writing ever since then.
So, as a pretty avid reader of the site, it seems like there's kind of a formula where you basically, post out something kind of thought-provoking, provide some background and research for it, and then really kind of dig into a thought and a idea. Is there kind of a set formula that you work from? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it kind of varies depending on who is writing. But a lot of times I will do that. I will look through different, news articles, maybe studies. A lot of times I just look at what catches my interest. In terms of the subjects I write on, a lot of times it's related to education, related to family. I also do some culture stuff. And then I, bring my thoughts into it. I also like to bring in ideas from the past, because I think that's one thing we have forgotten about a lot, that the past really does have a lot of wisdom to offer us. And a lot of times we poo-poo that, but they really did have some profound insight, and it's very applicable to what we are dealing with today. So I like to do that a lot. And then a lot of times I will just end with a question, because frankly, when I'm writing these articles, I don't necessarily always know, what I think on it myself. Maybe I'm just pondering it and rolling it over in my mind and so on. And I want to encourage other people to do that as well. And maybe to think outside of the box in terms, a lot of times I feel like I'm trying to bring up a different side than what we are normally fed in the media and so on and so forth. And so I'm trying to direct people to, hey, let's look at the other side of this, toss it back and forth. What do you think? And so on.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Could you repeat the
no,
question?
that was my fault. I was looking. I was doing two things at once, multitasking. So let me do that again. So as a 20-year educator, let me back up. So a lot of what you write about is education.
Yes.
And that's kind of what drew me to you. And of course, the other people write about it as well. But can you tell me your background? You mentioned, I already brought up that you're a music teacher. And can you tell me a little bit about your interests and experience with education?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the music educator, I don't actually do that anymore. But I did run my own piano studio for over a decade. And that was on my own and also under the umbrella of a private school as well. And I did learn a lot from that. It was very interesting for me to see just the aspect of teachers working. It gave me a new perspective on how hard they do work and really difficult tasks that they have, particularly in dealing with behavior issues and just the exhausting nature of it. I also gained some interesting insight on, how do I say this? The ancient Greeks actually did not have children start school until they were 7 years old. And from teaching piano, I really could see the wisdom of that, because children really, you could see the concepts would not necessarily click with them until they just about hit 7 and so on and so forth. So that is another thing that I have brought into my work with Intellectual Takeout is questioning our kind of push for earlier education all the time, just from that experience and so on and so forth. I also think that it gave me an interesting glimpse into curriculum that you use, because even with music, we have gone to a lot of method books, and I saw how that really drags out the time in which children are learning. And so they can get into a lot of the more difficult music a lot quicker than a lot of our normal method books do. And I think sometimes that translates over into the normal education realm too. So,
as a public school teacher, let me back up here for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the early Greeks, and
yes.
that's, I think, one of the things that I learned a lot about through reading Intellectual Takeout is you really do go back to Romans, Greeks, and even some of the big philosophers, early American as well. To Chesterton is someone that I've seen brought up in several of the Intellectual Takeout articles, and I hadn't known much about him. So thank you for that. That's what I really kind of like about Intellectual Takeout is it does explore those ages of early Western civilization to, again, even C.S. Lewis I know has brought up quite a bit as well.
Yeah, he's a favorite around here.
Yeah, I bet. So are those kind of people that you really draw from, a lot, like your whole writing team?
Yeah, I think we do. That's one thing, we can get a lot of wisdom from them, but another thing, we also want to use it as somewhat of a teaching tool because so many people are not familiar with those authors anymore. We focus a lot on, modern authors, books that were written in the last 10, 20 years or so, what pundits today are saying, but I think it's valuable definitely to pull out their insights and how they apply today, as I said before.
So I've been a public school teacher, my entire career. And so I've seen the amazing teachers. I've worked with just so many amazing teachers. And again, I appreciate that. And I appreciate certainly public education, but I also understand that there are some deep institutional problems that, certainly I've seen from the inside that have developed over the years. From your perspective as a writer and someone who has also been on the inside of teaching, what's your sort of sense of ways we can fix education or things that need fine-tuning? Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say, and this probably sounds somewhat difficult to take sometimes, but I think the overall concern and problem with schools today is that it's a broken system. And it's the teachers and it's the parents and most importantly, the children who are suffering because of that broken system. The biggest indicator of this type of failure is like the nation's report card when you're having such a lack of proficiency, like whether it's in history, where American high school seniors are only 12% proficient, or even in reading, it's only 37%. But the thing that people often go off and do right away is blame teachers. And you can't pin the blame entirely on the teachers. I mean, there are, of course, in every situation in life, yes, everybody takes some of the blame. But I think one of the big places where the blame should be laid is that bureaucracy has grown so much. And one way that you can say this is that education has become extremely federalized in the last 30, 40 years or so. So it's not local anymore. And one way that you can see this is in the decline of school districts. I believe it was in the 30s, there were upwards of 100,000 school districts in America. And in 2014, I believe there were just over 14,000. So there was a huge drop in that, where you're consolidating schools, you're bringing all the kids together, you're bringing the teachers under this huge umbrella of, top-heavy bureaucratic administration where you must do this and so on and so forth. So that is one area, I think, definitely. And because of that also, school staffing has changed. There is a chart not long ago put out by economist Mark Perry, and he noted that support staff in schools, I think this was since 1980, had grown by 40%. Instructional staff had grown by 54%, but the administrative staff had grown by 88% just since 1980. And so I think that is one area where you see definitely it's just too much top-heavy aspect of the administration. And that gives teachers less autonomy on what to do, what they can do in their classroom, and so on and so forth. Curriculum, I think, is another big problem because everybody's always chasing silver bullets, like, oh, let's do this curriculum, let's do that. And so we're changing so rapidly over time. And it gets students confused, it gets parents upset, and it leaves teachers scrambling a lot of times. And a lot of times I think the curriculum that is being enforced top down is not as rigorous as it was in the past. If you look at history tests or English tests from the past, it's amazing. I mean, I'm overwhelmed sometimes at the books that they read or the amount they did, and you feel like, oh man, you know, and my education just does not live up. And so that's one thing about curriculum. Also, it seems like we've kind of lost a cohesive idea about the curriculum. It used to be that education really had a purpose, but now it seems like we kind of, oh, you should know a little bit about this and a little bit about this and so on and so forth. And it gives kids kind of this smattering of subjects, and they come out feeling like, oh, you know, it's not cohesive. That's one reason I really, really love classical education, is that they usually build on the foundation and they just keep building on it, and they incorporate history and literature and everything. And so kids have much more of a full picture of what's going on. But again, that doesn't happen a lot of times in our top-down system. Another thing that I think is a problem is discipline. I've seen many reports from teachers where they're saying, it's just out of control. You know, I want to do my best. I want to teach my class, but I am not getting any backup support by my administrators and so on and so forth, because maybe we're focusing more on the self-esteem of the child and so on. So those are some of the problems that I think we're definitely dealing with in the schools today, whether it's public or even private too. I think you see it also.
So I think you really made a nice case for a lot of the problems that are going on. I think they were pretty insightful. Do you think, what are the fixes though? Are there any easy fixes for us? I know, you know, charter schools are a possibility, you know, vouchers, that sort of thing. You know, I know for me, again, as a public school teacher, those are kind of verboten topics to discuss. But to me, you know, I think the kids' interests weigh more than anyone's, and we should really be looking for what's going to really be good for our children going forward. So what do you think about fixes and vouchers and, you know, even homeschooling, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons, especially like to vouchers and so on and so forth. You know, you're never going to get the perfect fix. For parents and possibly even teachers, vouchers or a similar concept like education savings accounts, so on and so forth, or charter schools also, they may cut down on bureaucracy somewhat and allow more of the money to go directly to the instruction of the child, you know, so it can be tailor-made, so teachers have more freedom to, you know, I think this would be best for the child and so on and so forth. But there's also problems with that, because when you have those, you're subject to more testing and so on and so forth. You're you can be subject to even more oversight then when you get those vouchers and so on and so forth. But, and in those cases, it's good to make sure that standards are up to par when you are using those vouchers and so on. So, I mean, I think they can be a very wonderful thing, but if people are going to go down that road, then they also need to realize that there are issues that could arise that they might not like in the future, with as far as more control and so on and so forth. And I can't remember, was there another part to that question?
Well, let me kind of ask, blend into our next question, which was,
okay.
Let's talk about higher ed as well. Can we put that basket in there? Are we dealing with the same problems at higher ed as we're dealing with K-12? You know, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, or apples to oranges? what are your thoughts on higher ed?
I think both of them are definitely related because, the kids we train in are the K-12 they're going into college, and many professors are saying, I can't get these students to write. They don't seem to know the basic grammar and so on and so forth. And then, you go back to the K-12 level and teachers are saying, well, either our hands are tied or any other things like that. So yeah, I think they're definitely related. But I think sometimes too, schools, I think, can fall into a trap of, hey, I don't know if the kids can handle the challenging material as easily. And I think that is one thing, as I mentioned before, that I learned in teaching piano, that I think kids can handle more challenging and they like a challenge. But this might be one of the problems that we're, not passing on, because there are, of course, different levels. Some kids can't handle as much. Some kids can handle much more. So I think, yeah, we do need to figure out a little bit how we can meet everyone at their level. And that might play into higher education and so on and so forth. Another thing about higher education is that we have had this mentality for a long time that everybody needs to go to higher education. And I think there is beginning to be a pushback against this, especially in terms of apprenticeship, that not everybody is equipped and not everybody is interested in pursuing the topics that you would have in higher education. And when we put everybody in a box of saying, yes, this is what, and I think we do it out of good intentions. We want the kids to be ambitious and, to be successful in life. And we think, oh, college is the way. But I think we really need to diversify. And I think that would help with both at the higher education and at the K-12 level. If we were saying, okay, you're really not interested in maybe academic type subjects, okay, let's try out something else. Maybe you'd be in engineering or more of these hands-on type jobs and so on and so forth. So I do think that our the trends I've seen towards more apprenticeship again are a positive thing and something that I could see definitely helping both the K-12 level and the higher education level.
As a matter of fact, I think you just wrote an article yesterday about that, didn't you?
I don't know. I kind of lose track of all the articles, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I did see something, and I thought it was within the last couple of days that you had
Okay.
posted something about that. So, again, I really appreciate that you, again, make me think, and I encourage my educator friends to read it. And I know you tap into, it's not just an educational website, you tap into a lot of different things. And I'm sure that you have people that don't agree with everything.
Yes, definitely. And that's fine. That's what it's out there, to discuss the ideas in a rational, calm way too. So.
Well, and I think you definitely hit the mark there. I think your articles are thought-provoking, but not, heavy-handed, not, certainly I never, any of your writers come across as, kind of these angry voices that we hear so often in the discourse nowadays, which is very sad. Do you think, I'm going to kind of bounce down to our last question here, because I think we've hit on the question before, but how do you see, I'm a big ed tech person, and most of certainly the interviews I do are ed tech related. What are your thoughts on educational technology?
Well, again, I think tech is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's a huge part of my job, to be honest. But as with everything in life, it needs to be used with discretion and moderation. And I think a lot of times we tend to treat it as the silver bullet that will save education. And the fact is, nothing really is going to be a silver bullet. It's going to work for some people, other people it's not going to. So I think definitely if it furthers the mission of education in the content, of it, then that's great. If not, and if it's actually causing a distraction, then we have to reevaluate. I think especially like in high school, for example, you have to be discerning how you use it. If, like we were talking about just a moment ago, if kids are going to be doing like an engineering apprenticeship and or so on and so forth and are interested in that, then tech would be great to introduce them to, because that's going to be something very useful. It's very geared to that subject and so on. If, on the other hand, they're very interested in English and writing, that might not be the best and wisest place to use it, because there are many studies that are coming out now that when you're always on the devices, they're not helping you think as well, not connect thoughts, and so on and so forth. Like even I think cursive writing, they say when you're writing longhand, you are able to process things so much better than if you're typing and so on. So I think it really depends on the arena, the subject that you're going to use it in, and it needs to be kind of evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
I agree. And to kind of answer, just ask one follow-up question before we go to our Speed Geek questions. Do you think, your website, and again, from reading a lot of the articles, you go back to the, early Western civilization, to the classics, to some of the big named philosophy writers. Do you think we've lost our way with going back to, our Western civilization underpinnings, maybe?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And I think that would be one area where, we might find some solutions if a lot of times we no longer have this common culture anymore of a cultural literacy where, everybody understood a reference to some classical book, or that this was a reference to Shakespeare, or that this was a historical fact or something. And we don't really have that anymore. And I think, that helps in society to keep us on the right track, keep us agreeing more, and so on. And, diversity is good, but a lot of times people forget, I think, that diversity spreads us apart. And so we're sitting here in our culture nowadays and saying, why are we in so much chaos and disagreement? Well, you kind of need that common culture to rally around, and so on and so forth. So yes, I definitely think that a return to more of these Western civilization ideas, books, and so on would definitely be helpful.
It's funny. I'm pretty sure it was an article that you wrote about cartoons, about
Yes.
the old, Bugs Bunny cartoons, and how they were kind of a teaching tool. And I'm an observer of tangential learning. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's kind of the learning through things like TV and video games. And so that one, I used that in a presentation I did about, tangential learning, that article, and about how, like, so many things when we watch Bugs Bunny cartoons,
Yes.
we would hear like a Beethoven piece of music and say, hey, I knew that from Bugs Bunny,
Exactly.
not even knowing. And then after the fact, you're like, wow, what other music did Bugs Bunny do? So
Yeah.
and even the Shakespeare reference, I think you posted a YouTube clip of, one of the Shakespeare things. Again, to be or not to be, everyone heard it as a kid through cartoons first. But
exactly.
then,
yeah.
You wondered it drew you to learn more about it. You thought, wow, that must be good. So kudos on that article. I really liked that.
Thank you. That was a fun one to put together.
Yeah. So before we go to the Speed Geek questions, I just want to say I think you're doing great work with the site. And again, I think it's thought-provoking for people, educators, and just people who are paying attention to the culture. I think it's a website with heart and with thought-provoking ideas. And so keep up the good work. I'm really
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm so glad you came and talked to me about it. So here we go. We're going to do the Speed Geek questions. So give me a minute to set them up. So these are going to be just short answer.
Okay.
And can you see the Speed Geek questions? It's always
I can see some of them, yes. So
okay. Let me just make sure everyone can see them. Okay. And so I'm going to spin the wheel. And again, just a quick short answer. off the top of your head kind of thing. Okay, are you a gamer, and what's your game?
Oh, I am not a gamer. Sorry about
Words
that.
with friends. It can be chess, anything,
Oh.
cards.
Not really.
Solitaire.
I'm a bookworm. So yes,
Okay.
I would definitely pick up a book more than a game. So.
All right. Well, you're a good person for that. I wish. Do you have a favorite tablet? Do you have an iPhone, iPad?
I mostly use my computer for work, and I just have a basic PC.
Okay.
So I'm going to be pretty boring on these different tech questions.
You're old. You're what they call old school, right?
I am, yes.
All right, here's a good one. So Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, or what's your favorite fantasy?
Well, there again, I have seen a few Star Trek episodes when I was younger. And so I'd probably have to say that, but otherwise, Star Wars or Harry Potter, I'm not big into. So I know
I was thinking Lord of the Rings would come up.
Oh, well, I am definitely more a historical fiction type person and classics. So boy, I'm just failing you on these, I guess.
Let's take one more. No, you're not failing. You're answering them honestly, which is the point. Oh dear. This is probably
maybe
a tough one
you
too.
better pick another one than that.
We'll get through. We'll get one here. All right. What's your favorite way to unplug? So at the end of the day, how do you walk away?
I love to walk. I also love to garden, and I like to read. So those would be the things that I like to do. So
awesome. Perfect. Well, again, for those of you watching, I would highly recommend Intellectual Takeout. I usually follow it through my Facebook feed, so you usually come up on that. So that's a good way to follow it. And again, keep up the good work. Your whole staff is doing a great job, and I'll be reading.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right.